Hello everyone, Stephanie Davis here today. Today I'm joining you with another share for my design team project for the Not Too Shabby shop. And I'm going to be using some products from My Favorite Things. This is the Wildflower set from My Favorite Things, and it has some gorgeous flowers as well as I have the coordinating dies. I thought they would be really pretty if I watercolored them. So I'm going to do some no-line watercoloring with my Daniel Smith watercolors. I've used the Ink on 3 no-line coloring, the fade out ink pad. For you, it might be a bit hard for you to see while I'm painting, but as you can see from the picture that I showed you, I can see the lines very easily. I'm showing you my Daniel Smith Summer palette, and that is my favorite thing. If you guys have been with me for a while, you know I've collected a lot of watercolors. I'm slightly addicted to all of the colors. I love trying all the colors and all the brands, and each season I go through and select new colors to try. I really do my best to try different colors and experiment with different colors and see how they all mix together. That's the most fun part to me. I like to start with very light shades, so I really add quite a bit of water at first. That's one of the really fun things about watercoloring is you start with the light shades and then you go and they call it glazing, which just means you're adding another layer, and you can add as many layers as you'd like. And so I start off, and a lot of times the watercolors will dry back, meaning they will fade, and so then you can go add another layer. The tricky part about watercoloring is learning how much water to have on your brush, which it just takes practice to figure that out. It really is the most relaxing way to color. Doing it this way, I don't even have lines I have to stay in. I can make it however I want. I will be listing my palette below in case you're curious what colors I'm using for summer. I've had this palette for most of spring and the summer, and then come fall I'll change it and I'll mix up a color. Now some of my colors will stay all the time. Is Pyroline Scarlet, and I think this is one of the colors that stays on my palette all the time. Also Quinacridone Gold stays on my palette almost all the time. I don't think I've ever taken it off for more than a day. Same with Pyroline Violet and Pyroline Green. Those are some of my favorites that I really can't live without. They do wonderful mixes as well as it's beautiful coloring for shading. I'm going to be using the green, the Pyroline Green, to shade my green leaves. I did use Green Apatite Genuine for the base color, but then I'll go in and shade it with some Pyroline Green. So I'm going to let you watch me paint, and you'll see how when I was painting these, I'll be honest, this whole card, I painted it. I really didn't like how it's turning out. I guess I was just having a bad day. I love these colors, and I should have loved it. But funny story, I didn't like anything about this card or the way I was painting. For some reason, I kept getting frustrated with how I was painting, and I actually had deleted all this footage, and then I had to go recover it because when I looked at it a couple days later, I was like, it's really pretty. I don't know why I was so hard on myself, but I can tend to be that way. So I will say, when you're painting, don't compare yourself to others. It's hard not to do that, but really just enjoy it. Keep trying, because a lot of times it may not look so good, and then you'll go back later and realize you just need to add more layers. So now I'm using Quinacridone Coral. It's one of my favorite colors for spring and summer. When it's washed out, it looks like a light pink. You can deepen it and add layers and make it a deep coral color as well. Now you guys know I love my Schmincke as well. And if you're wondering the difference between Daniel Smith and Schmincke, the difference to me is Schmincke colors, they don't have as many granulating colors, meaning they don't have the colors that have as much texture. And sometimes you might, when you start painting, you may not like the granulation. I know at first I didn't like it right away, and then now I absolutely love it. So Daniel Smith has amazing granulating colors if you like granulation. If you don't like granulation, Schmincke paints don't have as much granulation. Also, the Daniel Smith paints, most of the time, you have to make your own pans. Some of you don't want to pour your paints into half pans. The Schmincke half pans come in a pan that is perfection. They're exactly like their tube paints. They're just all ready in a pan for you. Now, Daniel Smith did recently release some half pan sets where you can get a few colors, but I have to warn you, the palette they come in, that the paints themselves are lovely, and they're already in perfect little half pans for you if you don't want to mess with squeezing out your own tube paints into pans. But the palette that the Daniel Smith half pans come in, they're just horrid. I don't even know how to make excuses for them. They're cheap and they don't lay flat. The color will actually run down the back of it and get all over your table. So they're great price point to get a few colors if you want to try them. Just know you're going to have to grab a little saucer from your kitchen to use as a palette. Don't try painting in that palette or you'll have a mess. So both brands are really excellent. You can't go wrong with either. Sennelier is another brand that's great. So try not to focus on what brand you're using, because seriously, some people want to start paint wars over what is the best watercolor. They're all lovely. So start with what you have, use what you have, and then try a few new colors when you can. Try a few new brands if you can, but just use what you have and enjoy what you have to start off with. It's more important actually to use good paper and a good brush than which paint you have, I think. So I'm using some B paper, which is a very good quality paper. It's not quite as good as Arches. Arches is my favorite by far. But for card making, sometimes I don't know if Arches is actually worth the cost. For people that are beginning to watercolor, that is. I found when I was beginning to watercolor, it was intimidating to use anything very expensive because I was afraid I was wasting it. So try the B paper. I'm using the 140-pound B paper. I'll have it linked below. For watercolors, I've used student grade as well as professional artist grade. I love them all. But many of you ask which one is my favorite. My top three are the Daniel Smith, Schmincke, and Sennelier. I like my white knights. I love them all. Okay, so I did not mean to ramble on and on about paint brands. I did not intend to do that when I started this card, but I do get a lot of questions about different brands. And as you can tell, it's as hard for me to choose my favorite watercolor as it is to pick a favorite child of my 3 children. So I think you just have to test them and figure out that for yourself. So I am going in and I'm adding more layers to all of my flowers, and I'm now going to go in with some gouache. Gouache is opaque watercolors, and here again I tried the Arteza gouache first. The Arteza gouache is lovely, so I had to go try the Schmincke and the Holbein brands. They are even more lovely, but the Arteza brand is a good brand to start with. It's not like Artist Loft. Those are the only paints that I honestly threw in the trash. The wonderful thing about gouache is you can use it for splatters, which I'm addicted to now, but you can go right on top of a dark shade with a light shade, which you cannot do with watercolors. So here I have die cut all of those florals out, and I'm going to add more texture and detail with my Faber-Castell Polychromo colored pencils. I'm going to add all the detail. I love to add indigo with purple. I think it goes perfectly together and just adds some deep shadows. And then I'm going to use the detail to kind of make more, add a little more detail, but also add some shadows and more interest. And I think it just looks so much prettier once I've done this. And you really don't have to do that. I just really enjoy it. And now I'm going to go in and do some splatters. I did half of them with splatters and without, so I could test to see which way I wanted to go, and I really like the ones with the splatters more. Sometimes I think maybe because I don't paint perfectly, I think it adds more interest, but also it kind of hides some of my places I didn't paint that great. So since I'm doing no line watercoloring, I thought it turned out really pretty like that. I had cut out my bold beautiful die out of some gold cardstock, and I'm going to set that aside while I line up all of my flowers. I really didn't know how I wanted to lay these out, so I wind up laying them out, and then I go in and add glue. And some I will dip in the glue and attach right away, and then some I'll use the stylus. I'm going to arrange these how I think it looks nice, And then I'm going to use a scratch piece of cardstock so that I can line up my sentiment that I cut out of gold cardstock. I went outside and sprayed some spray adhesive on the back of that and then attached it to the acetate. I'm using some score tape as my adhesive onto this acetate pouch. I'm using the A2 rectangle shaker pouch as well as the A2 rectangle frame die. And I love these two together. They make the easiest shaker cards, even though I'm not making a shaker card this time. So I'm placing the frame around the acetate. You really want to attach this first before you apply it to the card. And I'm using my bone folder to make sure it's fully attached. And then now I'm going to place some sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. I'm just dabbing them in glue with my little picker tool and then placing them here and there. And I did this in lieu of a shaker. I thought it added a lot of interest. And now I'll go ahead and remove the score tape that I had applied to all of the card that I had attached to the back of that shaker pouch. And I actually didn't get it on quite straight enough, so I cut it out and I put it on a new card base. And this time I was a little more careful and made sure I got it on there straight. Now after looking at this, I realized that I didn't have the inside of the B, the little inside parts to the B and the A quite straight. So I went back, I took them off, I took the inside parts off, and I went back and used some black cardstock that I cut out. So then I could just use that as a guide and then I could line them up perfectly. And that worked out much better. And here is my final card. I thought it turned out really pretty. I just had to wait a few days to realize it. So I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you have a great day.